Well, hello there everyone. If you've been a subscriber in the early days of this channel, and I mean before we even had 100 subscribers and before the channel was even a year old, you might know I talked about Granblue Fantasy on occasion, and that's because I'm fairly fond of this series. Versus Rising was an awesome game, and even better was the big action RPG Granblue Fantasy Relink, genuinely one of my favorite games to come out in years. Fun combat, a great selection of characters, a solid story, and some kick-ass bosses. Basically, it was a nice palate cleanser after Final Fantasy XVI ended up being far too much action and not enough RPG, and honestly the action got pretty repetitive too. But with Endless Ragnarok right around the corner, I figured what better time than now to take a look at the game's bosses and rank them from worst to best. And I mean basically all of them. I counted a total of 43 bosses to look at today, which not my longest ranking, but it's definitely up there. So get comfy as we dive on in. Number 43, Scarmiglione. This game may have some very high boss quality overall, but picking the bottom two bosses in this game was very straightforward and easy. And for all the problems number 42 has, and believe me, we'll get to that, at least it still feels like a boss fight. There are some battles in this game that try to do something different, and while they do usually pan out at least to some extent, they do not for the giant ice skeleton. The battle with Scarmiglione isn't a boss fight, it's a freaking tower defense segment. The boss is present and needs to be taken out, but it's more of a pain in the ass than a serious threat, because the real danger is the endlessly spawning frozen skeletons that will spawn in behind you and go attack Historiath, because they're just mean-spirited and very bitter individuals, so you have to repeatedly just stop fighting the boss or the main horde of enemies and go babysit the fully grown cat lady. And it's not like only one or two enemies attack you, no, you'll be dealing with a very large number of foes like it's Dynasty Warriors or something, all while there's a giant icy skeleton also wanting in on the action, and as a bonus, he can just choose to teleport to, I don't know, try and bum rush Historiath or something like that from a different location. And it just gets annoying. It's definitely a sour spot on the boss roster, and if I could cut one boss from the game, it would be this one, no questions. Number 42, Behemoth. For those wondering, yes, I am going to be including the post-game super bosses, for better or for worse. Mostly for better, but in this case, whoo freaking boy, the Behemoth is annoying as hell. Just look at this footage. This thing moves ridiculously fast and is constantly attacking you like a complete and total spaz. And while I do think Lucilius takes the crown for hardest boss in the game due to how much crap is going on, I think the Behemoth is a very close second just on sheer aggression alone. If you're a melee-focused character, good frickin' luck. The only character I've ever found that's effective against this boss is Toyin, and I have to zone him out like the worst fighting game character. The projectile-spamming jackass, that is. It's frustrating because there's a good boss beneath all of this, his attacks are awesome, and the fight has some great spectacle, but he's too freaking aggressive where 80% of the characters in this game are unviable for this boss fight. And to be honest, Racken and Organ aren't going to be able to do much either. The only character I've ever been able to consistently beat this boss with is Toyin, because she can keep up the pressure from the other end of the arena. And one time I was able to beat this boss as Id because his dragon form can forcibly slow the Behemoth, and slow is a busted status effect that works on basically everything in this game. I know this guy's supposed to be a super boss, but quite honestly, I don't even know if some of these attacks are even possible to avoid with how much he overlaps everything. It's kind of ridiculous. Number 41, Mysterious Swordsman. Our next three entries are the scripted boss fights of the game, with the weakest of the bunch being against the Mysterious Swordsman. Mostly because you have multiple proper fights with him, so having the obligatory part where you get your ass kicked mostly just exists to build up the second encounter with him in Chapter 5, which is still acting as build up to a future confrontation in Chapter 8. Of the scripted bosses, this is probably the least exciting visually, and is the only one where you can just kind of leave, make a cup of coffee or something, and, well, the game will be waiting for you when you get back. Number 40, Lilith. And now for our main villain of the game, who surprisingly we don't get a regular fight against in her human form, but instead of just standing around, you do need to survive for a little bit as she's going to go crazy with the bullet hell. But ultimately, it's still another plot fight that ends all too quickly without much involvement from you, the player. Number 39, Tutorial Bahamut. Now to cap off the game's prologue, we have ourselves a big fight with Bahamut, who broke free of Lyria's control yet again. Must be a day that ends in Y. Bahamut looks awesome flying through the sky and tearing up the Grand Cypher that somehow still has not broken after all the times Bahamut went berserk, and any other issues that may have happened in the process as well. It's basically impossible to lose, but damn if it doesn't make for an awesome first impression seeing this fight not even 5 minutes into the game beginning. It's here to act as a hook for the player, and you know what? Mission accomplished on that matter, because this had me instantly invested when I first fought this boss back when the game came out. On replay, sure, it does lose a little bit of its luster, but still, it's a very cool set piece, and the proper Bahamut boss fight will be ranking much, much higher on this list when we get to him. Number 38, Griffin. The Griffin is honestly a pretty annoying mini-boss. He spends entirely too long just flying in the air, making him a pain in the ass to hit if you're not playing as one of the game's 3 range characters, and realistically, Eugen isn't really good against this boss because his bullets fire so slowly, and his attacks have some of the weirdest timings to dodge in general. On top of that, his gimmick is just making a bunch of tornadoes, which looks cool enough, I guess, but we already had a big scary wind boss fight against Fury Kane in Chapter 3, and that was also multiple chapters ago, so this fight just feels like padding. Not to mention, you could have already faced the Griffin through the side missions, so seeing one as a required boss doesn't really have much of any appeal to it. I do wonder if it's possible to just activate this key and then leave the Griffin alone and not fight him, which would actually be pretty funny. Number 37, Wilness Iceworm. This fight is just so fucking boring. Initially, I was actually debating lumping the elemental dragons together, but I was honestly pretty happy that despite having similar models, all the fights felt very distinct and like their own things with different movesets, so they were doing better than the dragons in Elden Ring. Though unfortunately for Wilness, that also means he's taking a hit because while I'm usually quite partial to the ice dragons, this one just plain sucks. The issue with this fight is it doesn't really have anything to set it apart from the other elemental dragons. In the first phase, like, the Fireworm is a massive positioning check, as it loves to spam area denial with, fire and setting the arena on fire. The Earthworm is far more of a physical attacker, the Windworm carries a ton of spectacle, and the Light and Dark dragons are so far above the other 4 in terms of raw power, it's not even comparable. What does the Iceworm do? An annoying status effect, and a boring ultimate attack that goes on for entirely too long with basically no real danger and 0 ways to retaliate during the attack. The fight just sucks. It's boring and I'm falling asleep here. Number 36, Vulcan Bola. Vulcan Bola isn't down here because I think the fight is completely terrible. In fact, there's a similar foe that will appear much higher on this list, but he's down here because the battle in Chapter 7 is jank as all hell, with it trying to simultaneously be a level and a boss fight, which is cool on paper, but it ends up a bit odd in execution and not exactly panning out very well. On top of that, the camera in this particular fight decides to be particularly bad compared to basically every other boss fight in the game. No, why would I want to focus on where I am and where the boss is attacking? I'd much rather get a close-up of his right shoulder and then look up his asshole. It's not an awful fight, but the jank can really get in the way, and I think the devs knew this because it's the only fight with mid-battle checkpoints as a sort of patchwork thrown in. Thankfully though, this is the last boss I have any real negativity to say about because from here on everything is at least decent, and the fact that we still have 35 more bosses to cover, that's actually a pretty good feeling. Number 35, Quakeadile. While Bahamut may be the big cinematic fight to kick the game off, it's the Quakeadile that fits the first boss bill, more mechanically speaking anyways. But at the same time, while it does a very good job in terms of the basic raw mechanics, the fight is still very heavily scripted, with your party members coming to help you, the guaranteed stun periods, free link attacks, and all that good stuff. It does a good job teaching you the fundamentals, but it's filled to the brim with tutorials. While his health bar may initially seem imposing, it's only about half of what it appears to be, because your Skybound arts will demolish this boss, and the full burst will put his ass on a t-shirt. Still, as a tutorial, it works well enough. Number 34, the Chucklehead Brothers. The title so nicely coined by Eugen. After the Quakeadile, we have a fight against this trio of dipshits. 3 elite enemies at the same time isn't anything super crazy, but we're still in tutorial land here, and this fight wants to make sure the player is ready to deal with multiple targets at once, which I can commend, as it will be very important in the next boss fight that happens after this one. This is also thankfully the last boss that feels more like a teaching tool than an actual boss fight, so I don't have to keep repeating that. Overall, it works pretty fine. Number 33, the Sword Veil. The Sword Veil isn't much of a boss fight, but the idea of a bunch of telekinetic Lalafels using their power to try and shank you with a sword is quite amusing. Much like the last entry, it's a horde boss more than a boss, but this time it's against very remote enemies that don't really show up anywhere else, so it gets knocked up a spot higher. Number 32, Rock Golem. The Rock Golem is the cold tap water at 7 PM boss fight. It's not amazing, but it's not unpleasant. Nothing it's doing is astronomical, but it all works well enough, with grand slams, punches, and some rock spikes from below, and good old-fashioned earthquakes thrown in for a bit of flavor. The fight is perfectly serviceable and fun enough for a mid-chapter mini-boss that's just chilling out next to an objective, and it's your first time being able to encounter one in the game, so while it isn't the most unique foe, it hasn't had any sort of chance to become stale either. So, you know what, I'll give it some credit where it's due. And the fact that you can go and bring a projectile up to the boss before it begins and throw it in his face is funny. Number 31, Id Duel. You fight Id a lot in this game, but the most unfortunate of his battles would have to be his duel in your character episode, because by the time you unlock it, you have to have already beaten the game and unlocked this game's equivalent to high rank, and if you forgot to tackle this fight until you reached max level, yeah, the fight doesn't last very long, and there's no way to really make the battle harder. Whoops. Number 30, Goblin Eater. As I'm typing this part of the script, I currently have the demo for Endless Ragnarok downloading. And as I'm reading this part of the script off, I have now since completed the demo for Endless Ragnarok. It's fun, I like it. The Goblin Eater is a cooler looking and better designed version of the Griffin boss fight. Instead of flying out of the way constantly, this boss is a lot more aggressive with his melee attacks, providing you ample opportunities to strike back and feel less derivative than his basic counterpart. The fight is still very easy, but to be fair, it's not supposed to be super hard. It's unlocked after you beat the final boss, and is 10 levels below it, to make up for the fact that you're required to play as Id here, which you might not have done before this. I did, but some people might not have. However, it is also one of the strongest party members in the game, so you're not really being strong-armed here. Ultimately, the fight works well as a sort of welcome to high rank moment, and I like it well enough. Number 29, Garrison. It's like Scarmiglione, but without the defense mission nonsense thrown in. Garrison is an aggressive foe that needs to be respected in battle for the damage he can do, but ultimately he lacks in poise and his very long recovery animations, so while the fight works well, he's extremely easy to just knock over and nearly stun lock to death. He is able to raise the undead though, which can add some challenge, and his ultimate is pretty cool when he has like shadow versions of the skeletons trying to bum rush you. The fight is still quite breezy, but it's fun. At least he's no lazy bones. Number 28, Corvel Earthworm. We're still stuck in this damn desert for our second of the 6 elemental dragon boss fights. Corvel doesn't have a bunch of crazy fire or magic up his sleeve. Instead, this dragon of earth is a massive brute, loving to fling around rocks and go for big scary physical attacks. Which sounds all fine and dandy, but he does have one major shortcoming, and that's that in his first phase it feels like he's just lacking in attacks. Phase 2 does a much better job as he starts causing earthquakes and trying to crash into you, which is one of the more enjoyable ultimates to deal with. But despite being a brute of the dragons, he felt oddly squishy and went down pretty effortlessly for me. It was kind of an anticlimax if I'm being brutally honest, and it's not helped by him sharing a boss theme with Willness, and it's far and away the weakest of the elemental dragon boss themes. That being said, it's not a bad fight. I'm glad it's here, but I'm not quite sure if I'd call it good for one of the last bosses in the game. Number 29, Nazir Banjo. I have absolutely no idea how to pronounce this thing's name, so I'm just gonna call him the Eyeball Monster. Anyways, The eyeball monster isn't pushing any crazy boundaries, but as a mini-boss early on in Chapter 5, he works well. Plus, it's the first time we actually have a mini-boss in the middle of a chapter, so that's pretty neat. All of his attacks feel fun to dodge, and everything he does just sort of works. Is he easy? Of course he is. Do I care? No, not in the slightest. He's very fun, and with the extra environmental interactions like being able to not only use the ice pillars as cover, but also break them to collapse the pillars on top of him, I think he's actually a pretty good addition as a mini-boss. I like him.
Shame we couldn't see eye to eye. Oh well, R.I.P., buddy.
That's it. No more puns this entire trip.
Number 26, Blizzardile and Infernadile. Players of the Endless Ragnarok demo may be familiar with the ice variation of this foe, but these two are the Quakeadile fully realized with their expanded movesets and elemental attacks thrown in for some spice, as these monsters have adapted to live in their environments, with Infernadile living in an island filled with active volcanic activity, while the Blizzardile lives in the icy tundra in the sky. They're giving the first proper boss fight a better showing of what they can truly accomplish, and I like that. Also, shout out to the slightly unconventional arena the Blizzardile has. It was something that a friend brought up when we were watching the Summer Games Fest, but too many action RPGs nowadays just have flat circular arenas or flat squares that are all just the same thing. And while this game isn't immune from having those, it still has some more arenas with at least a little bit of spice in them from time to time, so they don't feel completely stale and they don't feel completely flat. Number 25, Ancient Dragon. This guy is your test to unlock the very hard difficulty quests, and while he's not really difficult, he is pretty fun. He fights differently from the elemental dragons, acting more like a feral beast, while also being presumably the patriarch of the wyverns found throughout the region that have been harassing us throughout the whole game. He's pretty tame compared to a lot of what the in-game has to offer, but he's more involved than most of the main story bosses, so I'd say he's a solid on-ramp into the post-game and what they have to offer, and he's not a complete and total boring reskin, plus he's not a reskin at all like the Goblin Eater. So, yeah, overall, I think he does a pretty good job for what he needs to do. Number 24, Managarmr Neela. I was debating if I should include the Neela variants of the bosses in this ranking or not, but two of the three are different enough from their base fights to warrant separate rankings. Then there's Managarmr, who takes a great boss fight but suffers from having absolutely no bulk and dying entirely too quickly to even matter. Backed up by Galanza joining the battle shortly after to completely destroy any semblance of challenge the boss fight may have been teasing having. So it just dies entirely too quickly to matter, and well, we're in Chapter 9. This is the endgame of the story, so it's a little bit silly how easy it is. Number 24, Shadow Id. Once again, there are a lot of boss fights against Id in this game. Well, this time around, it's during the post-game where Id is forced to confront and finally conquer his inner demons, and when done well, this sort of trope works great in games, and I'd say it actually works pretty well here. The fight itself is basically just a theoretically tougher version of the boss fight with Id in Chapter 8, and that's cool. But I am saying theoretically tougher because it is a weird inverse where he might just be stronger as a playable character than he is as a boss fight, which is a refreshing change of pace, but that also means you can just tear into this guy with very little effort. Actually, speaking of stronger as a character than as a boss fight, he would totally be number 3 on the list if I redid that top 10 playable bosses video from like a year ago. Albeit, he's not beating out Shizuna or Virgil anytime soon, but it is funny how the top 3 are all white-haired swordsmen, so there's that, I guess. Number 22, Vrazarik the Fireworm. Our third of the elemental dragons, Vrazarik, is all about area denial. This boss fight might be the biggest positioning check out of any foe in the entire game, even compared to the other super bosses. Though, a part of that is because dodging the behemoth is not a matter of good positioning, it's a matter of an act of God. So, if you like these kinds of boss fights, I think you'll love Vrazarik, and yeah, I like him well enough. Plus, being the first of the elemental dragons that a new player is likely to come across, it gives him some level of presence, and his music is very awesome. He's a fun time overall, but he feels the most like the ancient dragons since they have some similar attacks, the ultimate being meteors falling from the sky once again. Though, going back to the music for a bit, it's far more retro sounding than the rest of the soundtrack, but honestly, I just love how video gamey it sounds. I know some people may not be into that, but I find that pretty cool. Number 21, Magliel. Fun fact, her voice actress is Jimmy Neutron. Now you can never unhear it. Anyways, Magliel takes the telekinetic Lalafell idea the Sword Veil had and cranks it up to shit 100 and fuck. She's using her abilities to send weapons flying around the arena, defend herself to make up for her lower than average HP, create blades that spin so fast they act like shockwaves or tornadoes, and command legendary weapons that act as their own mini-bosses that we have to beat, like she's Kreia from KOTOR 2. We have a half of the boss roster to go, and we're in the great tier, and I consider that to be very promising for the remaining fights on this list. And while Magliel isn't going anywhere above the halfway point, I think she's a pretty good litmus test. Anything better than her, it's a really, really fun time. Plus, something about her fight feels almost incomplete. Number 20, Furicane Niela. I'll try to keep this entry pretty brief, since it's hard to talk about Niela without talking about base Furicane, but it's a lot of the same awesome boss fight, now with additions like Lyria calling upon the true Furicane to fight the evil copy, and it joins your team deciding this whole being evil shtick is overrated, and he liked it more being a good guy. Be patient, he has autism. Okay, well, actually his sense of self is heavily suppressed for the last 15 years, sealing away an ancient powerful dragon, enough to take out Angraminyu, and blah blah blah, story stuff, same thing really. Overall, this fight's pretty fun, and it's just a good boss, but again, so I think this is where it belongs. Plus, it has a really funny line if you bring Io along and you get to phase 2.
Oh, great! A magical girl transformation! I forgot Furicane could do that.
You think she watched Sailor Moon, Precure, or Madoka? Number 19, General Galanza. Galanza is the general of the Silver Wolf Brigade and the obligatory battle hobo of the bad guys. Even if he does ultimately end up joining your side by the end of the game, he's really just in it for the fun of the game, and I respect that. But he's also the first real human boss of the game you fight, since the first id fight does not count. He's got faster attacks than some foes, but he's still fairly slow and deliberate with his telegraphs, which is a good thing since he's getting you more used to opponents in your weight class. He's got enough variety to keep new players on their toes while also being solid enough of a warm-up for veterans to get them back into the swing of things. Especially with what's to come, and personality-wise, the boss shows a ton of it here, which makes the fight a lot more memorable. The fight's awesome, but still, with this fight happening so early in the game, it feels like it's falling short of its true potential and missing its other half. Foreshadowing is a literary device. Number 18, Great Shield Madbeat and the Goblin Chieftain. It's the same boss fight, just with different names. The Great Shield Madbeat is the game finally taking all the dang tutorial gloves off and giving you a real fight. And it is very fun. Our fiery goblin adversary doesn't really rely on something like having multiple phases, instead he opts to have 3 modes where he can fight in. One's where he's utilizing a sword and shield to play more defensive, usually while backed up by lesser goblins, kind of taking on a commander role. One is where he sets aside his shield to become far more aggressive with his sword, At this point, he has more combos going on, and you need to be careful when he's targeting you specifically because he focuses usually on just one opponent. So you'd think he's super tanky when he goes all in two-handing his shield, right? No. Hilariously, when he two-hands his shield, he holds it like a giant metallic frying pan and starts trying to bonk you over the head with it, as well as creating shockwaves and every other piece of chaos. The fight starts off seeming generic, but it has a surprising amount of creativity thrown in, as well as being a decent step up in challenge after the, pretty easy battles earlier in the game, and it does a solid job to cap off Chapter 2 of, the game. It's a fun and creative early game boss fight that let me know these fights weren't just going to be a spectacle, but they were also going to have a nice amount of gameplay to them as well. Plus, this game's rendition of the boss theme Carving a Path to Sky's End is very good. Number 17, Excavalion. If there is any boss in the game that deserves the descriptor of primeval god, it is this guy. Excavalion is probably the largest boss in the entire game. I'm not going into some sort of model viewer to see the size comparisons, but I wouldn't be surprised if he was larger than even Versa Omega and Angra Mainyu. And you know what? Sure, it makes some level of sense that this thing was specifically designed as kind of an anti-kaiju weapon, but unlike Yu-Gi-Oh!, this one doesn't suck. In terms of sheer scale, the fight is unmatched, as you have the entire desert, which was pretty much most of the chapter, acting as your boss arena. The boss nails this awe-inspiring size of everything, but as you can imagine, it's going to be a level boss. Kind of. See, while climbing the foe is involved, it's not as if he's a static object that doesn't do anything. This boss is actively attacking you throughout the fight, and he's moving around the arena and firing upon you with his cannon, throwing debris, and, terraforming the desert around you as the fight progresses. It actually kind of reminds me of the giant robot boss fight from X-Men Origins Wolverine. Well, that game, at least. Anybody remember that fight? Hopefully not just me. And once you've taken out one of his legs, he's going to shoot down one of the sky ships, causing its supplies to fall out of the skies, so you need to get onto one of the turrets that got dropped and start blasting away at key points in his body to chip him down while avoiding his missiles and the frickin' nuclear bomb he'll try to drop on you. Be careful with that. Once he goes down to half health, you need to now climb up Excavalion, as he's currently trying to recharge. Now, when he's doing this, take a breath and make sure not to lose your footing, because it would be really embarrassing if you did, because you'd have to start the climb all over. And then, before we can get on his back to start attacking his core, he gets up, and now we get sent flying and have to slide down the side of Excavalion to deal a crippling blow to the gargantuan foe. It's an awesome boss fight, and sure, it's definitely far more style than it is substance, but damn it, the style is so cool that I don't really have it in me to care. It just looks so freaking awesome. Until we at last reach the final phase where we have to destroy the spinal core, but he's going to put up a shield that protects him, so you can't just go and whack away at it with reckless abandon. You need to take out the 3 designated shield notes first. It's not hard, but it's a little bit of something to cap the fight off. Overall, yeah, sure, this fight is far more style than substance, but I still think it's a really cool boss fight regardless of its issues. Number 16, Vulcan Bola Nihila. Vulcan Bola Nihila is like Vulcan Bola, but way cooler looking, with the black and purple color scheme going on. It just looks amazing, and the arena being this otherworldly apocalyptic landscape as everything is like falling down and up at the same time, it really stands out. There's also no awkward level sequence in between, and the camera doesn't completely shit itself during this fight, so I can finally talk about how cool this fight is when it's all working properly. The game points out it's actually a dragon similar in nature to Bahamut, which makes it far more of a threat than the other primeval gods to Lyria, because this thing could easily just seal her away into a crystal, which is what happened with the original Vulcan-Lola. Anyways, he's got some very cool looking and powerful attacks, he requires good positioning from the player, and his serpentine body likes to go through the donut arena and allows him to stay very mobile. And in Phase 2, he looks like he's about ready to drop the sun on top of you. The fight is awesome, and I vastly prefer it here as the straight up fight, and it's a lot better than the not very successful attempt at a level boss that was the original Vulcan-Lola. Plus, this thing looks like an in-game boss fight. This looks like the third to last boss in the game, which it kind of is. Number 15, Angra Mainyu. I want to point out now that we are in the amazing tier. I think every boss from this point on is at least a 9 out of 10, and we've got 15 more to talk about. Yeah, this game has some really good fights. Anyways, Angra Mainyu is a boss you fight twice in the game. The first time is as the end boss of Chapter 8, and it's a very big story fight. Angra Mainyu's body mostly exists within the Shadow Realm. No, I'm not kidding. So, it's only physical during a severe attack, like erasing your party members from existence. And yeah, at this point you can probably figure out Angra Mainyu is, well, the first phase is a plot boss fight. Everyone gets killed while Lilith spouts some nihilism bullshit. But then you get to phase 2 where your Sword of Eos is powered up to its maximum level, which you can actually get for yourself at the end of the post game if you're willing to put in the grind for it, and it's awesome. But here you have to refute the argument of any nihilist by, well, killing them. Though with the sad music and the lack of party members, yeah, this is another pretty plot-heavy fight, but this time you're breaking open cracks in reality to forcibly shatter and weaken Angra Mainyu so you can continue to tear into him. The fight isn't free, but it's more focused on being this big story moment and big emotional part of, well, the plot than some overwhelming challenge. But hey, we just had our boss fight not even 10 minutes before this. That was hard, so who cares? What really sells it though is we eventually make our way back to Lyria because we're not dead, which means she's not dead. That lifelink's quite convenient. And here's where we get to successfully summon out Bahamut. But it's not just a cutscene to demolish Angra Mainyu in like one shot. No. This part is awesome. You get to play as Bahamut and absolutely annihilate Angra Mainyu. It has its own gameplay mechanics and attacks, and sure, it's easy, but who the hell cares? It is so fucking cool. Sorry, I can't hear your criticism or difficulty over me having the time of my life. Actually, honestly, thank you Granblue Fantasy Relink for giving me a better Final Fantasy XVI than Final Fantasy XVI. Anyways, Chapter 8 has 4 separate boss fights in it, and we're only just now seeing the first of them in the list. In my opinion, Chapter 8 is probably the peak of the game. It's definitely my favorite chapter. Number 14, Furykin. Going from the game's presumed climax to our first big boss in a mission that was just meant to be a simple matter of help some villagers from some goblins, before everything went horribly wrong and set the main plot into motion. She is the wind spirit of this realm, and that means a whole bunch of tornado attacks and a boss arena that will get reused a fair bit, but who cares. She's quick and aggressive, and here to show that the easy early game is over, it's time to lock in. A cool detail I like in Phase 1 is how when she's staggered, her armor falls off, and she has to reattach it to her body, which I just think looks really cool. Plus, with Lyria accompanying us, we actually get to successfully summon Bahamut to take out her first phase, and there's also that part where you need to use Lyria's shield to actually stun and block Furykin. It's a very well done and creative boss fight, and I think it's really enjoyable. Phase 2 has her activate her magical girl transformation, where she turns from a centaur into an Uma Musume with a much larger sword, and the cinematics of this fight get cranked up a thing or 20, with her becoming a living tornado and her sword slashes being able to form tornadoes as well. And yeah, it could feel overwhelming for a moment, but all of her sword slashes are actually very well telegraphed, and they feel surprisingly natural to dodge and avoid. Everything about the fight just feels good. It may be an early game boss fight, but it does a great job telling the player, welcome to the big leagues, things are going to start getting real. And I have a really fun time with it. Number 13, Evil Blackworm. Evil has got to be the most on-the-nose name for a calamitous black dragon I've seen in a video game, but you know what? You do you, dude. The funny thing is, though, out of all the super bosses that break level 100, he's actually far and away the easiest of the bunch, and I'd argue he's easier than a fair number of the elemental dragons stuck at level 90. Don't get me wrong, the fight is still awesome. It's just that I think this is kind of hilarious, so I wanted to talk about it some. Why exactly is it because he's so easy? Well, it's because his ads are dark gyres. They are floating magical enemies that are also explosive, and I should add that when you destroy them, they can turn into explosive orbs that you can pick up and throw at an enemy. The Dark Gyre, in particular, has orbs that have the slow status effect tied to them. Guess what boss isn't immune to the slow status? Yeah, this actually ends up turning Evil from what should be a really tough in-game fight into the biggest joke of the game, at least out of the super bosses, unable to put up much of any fight, and is far and away the easiest on the proud difficulty super bosses. It's not even close. But again, the fight is still really fun, and if you need kind of a warm-up to get used to the super bosses, this is probably the best one to give a shot against. He'll be much easier than the other ones, but he also should get you more prepared for what the proud difficulty fights can bring. Number 12, Elusius Windworm. I did not forget about the Windworm. This fight is just very awesome. He's more physically aggressive like Corval, but he's not as easy to exploit, and his moveset feels more complete in both phases, especially since he has a bunch of wind follow-ups to his attacks. And that's especially true when he gets to phase 2 with his ultimate of tornadoes, creating more tornadoes inside of tornadoes, and you need to dodge all the little tornadoes to not get got by the big tornado. I know that sentence seemed very intelligible, but who cares? Moral of the story is, the game went hard for the elemental wind bosses and all the tornadoes. If this and Fury Cane are any indication, they might have had a bias. Maybe that's because it's the same element as the protagonist, I guess. But we do still have one last elemental dragon that we haven't talked about that rockets above all the rest, and you won't be seeing for quite a few more entries. Number 11, Lilith Angra Mainyu. Now it's time we talk about the last battle with the main villain of the game. Currently using Roland as a battery, Angra Mainyu is once again remaining in another dimension, but instead of plot powers, we just have to knuckle down and deal with it. Also, we might have found a way to open a rift or two on our own to go into the Shadow Realm to fight it. Now, though, we have the ability to, fight it and not just get completely destroyed by the plot. Ultimately, though, while it's got that cinematic flair, this fight is actually really easy, focusing on the cinematic gimmick instead of being a super hard boss fight, and that's okay. Plus, it's honestly funny how Lilith sounds more annoyed than anything when Angra Mainyu gets knocked down. It's like her ultimate weapon gets staggered and she acts like she now has to go to the grocery store to get new kitty litter or something because her cat had an accident. But of course, we're not done, because even after freeing Roland, she decides to go for the nuclear option and fuses with Angra Mainyu, which leads to phase 2, and this is the plot phase. You're surrounded by shadows, and you just have to keep fighting off endless hordes of enemies that come at you while the cutscenes play out. It's not hard, it's just here to move the plot forward. It also leads to the obligatory everyone's here moment, where the friends and allies we made along the journey come to assist us in this seemingly unwinnable uphill battle with Zathba, Magliel, Galanza, Historiath, and everyone else demolishing the shadows. And I love how Zathba just salvaged the giant-ass cannon from Excavalion. Yeah, sure, it's standard pretty much for JRPGs, and I mean, yeah, okay, but Granblue isn't exactly trying to rewrite the script here, it's trying to give you a good time, and yeah, it's a cool moment. When all the cutscenes are over, we get to her second health bar as the final phases begin. She now starts spamming the Watcher enemies, summoning shadows, and firing off lasers, and this fight can get downright crazy. This fight is busy, to put it nicely, but it's a fun adrenaline rush that keeps you on your toes and provides a strong challenge, as it presumably is the game's final battle. Honestly, the only real criticism I can level against it is that a lot of the fight requires you to keep your head on a swivel, so if you don't like juggling multiple things at once, you're probably not going to have a lot of fun with this boss fight. But I enjoy that sort of thing because, I don't know, there's probably something wrong with me, so I find the boss fight fun. Of course, things can get especially hectic when you reach the salvation phase at the end of the fight. However, there's also something else I need to mention, and that's that there's a lot of talking in this boss fight, and while it doesn't bother me, if that sort of thing annoys you, I could see this feeling like one of those "but it's a modern game" parody videos that Dexter Manning uploads. Those things are hilarious, by the way, don't get me wrong, it's just that if you get annoyed by that sort of thing, then you're not going to like this fight too much. Still, it's a more than satisfying climax that does a great job pretending to be the final boss fight of the game. Number 10, Managarmr. The last of the primevals is the Big Ice Wolf, the Managarmr. It's an awesome boss fight. Unlike the other primals, he doesn't really have multiple phases he goes through. Instead, he opts to shift between two different modes of either fast and agile or slow and built like an indestructible tank. And each form comes with their own strengths and weaknesses. I probably made this fight harder by playing as Io, but hey, I don't care, I had a fun time, and she fights so differently from most characters in the game that you have to rethink your playstyle. It's hard but enjoyable, and if you haven't given it a shot, I'd say give her a try sometime, she's actually a lot of fun. Plus, it's the last boss before the game truly opens up and your mastery grid expands, so it's, well, like the end boss of Chapter 5. So it can be a genuine challenge for first time playthroughs. Plus, each form having their own ultimates is very cool. Pun not intended, but not apologized for. And the music is also very good, even if it just sounds like Ice Theme Boss Music.wav. You know, I wasn't originally planning to do a bunch of these music segments in this video, but I actually grew to really love this game's soundtrack on my second playthrough for, well, this video. Anyways, it's a fun fight to act as your last trial before you're able to reach Seed Hollow and start to access the real meat and potatoes of the game, so I think he best works as a skill check to really see if you're able to begin engaging with the multiplayer and everything that that has to offer. It's a great fight. Number 9, Tayuatar. We're going back to Chapter 8, and you'd think this random mini-boss would be a whatever fight, and initially, it kinda seems like that. It's a very mechanically well-designed boss fight, with you being able to target most of his limbs, and the Tayuatar has a very fun moveset to deal with. It also kinda jump scares you when it shows up, it just kinda crashes through the wall and it's like, okay, we're in a boss fight now. And you don't really have a lot of mechanical enemies in this game. In fact, there's only really 2 total, so they stand out in terms of bosses. But the moveset is surprisingly involved and complex, almost like it would be something playable. Oh, wait a second. You have our second phase, where after you take out the first Tayuatar, you have to handle an enemy skyship and take out 8 more Tayuatars by piloting one of your own. And this segment is so freaking awesome, I wish we had more of this in the game. But it honestly seems like Cygames had a similar thought, because Endless Ragnarok seems to be implementing a lot of that if playable Fury Cane and Infernadel were any indication in the trailers. But either way, you're now getting to tear through the Avian attack force with one of their own mechs and single-handedly bring down one of their skyships. It's just so freaking cool and fun, and the Tayuatar actually has good controls, and I just wish it came up more than once in the base game, but hey, better to have an awesome moment once than not at all. Number 8, Lucilius. I just want to start by saying I hadn't fought Lucilius before this point, but I knew he was the big scary super boss of the game. But, oh boy. Even knowing that, I was unprepared. Even with a maxed out captain and well leveled party members, this battle was harder than anything else in the game, taking me upwards of 70 attempts, or a whole fucking week to beat. It's the hardest boss I've faced in any video for this channel. Nothing else even comes close. I was legitimately considering just giving up and throwing in the towel. Initially, it's just your big scary flashy attacks and laser beams that took me multiple attempts, but after you get 10% to 15% of his HP done, that phase is thankfully over, and honestly, once you realize it's better just to block and dodge when you need to, the lasers aren't quite as awful. Then the vocals kick in as 7 trumpets sound, and oh my fucking god, this part is absurd. You are now forced to overcome the 12 labors, and this is the hardest part of the fight, and maybe even the toughest part of the entire game. You gotta figure things out and not panic while he's counting down to ruin. The first bit is pretty easy, just hit all the colored sigils that break his barrier, but don't hesitate because once you start breaking the sigils, you're on a time limit inside of the countdown to ruin time limit, and if you take too long, it just blows up in your face, you take damage, and you have to start over. And you really don't want that ruin counter to fill up. Then we have to destroy his wings by selecting one of the Tetra Elementals and attacking it to scatter the power of the 4 orbs across the battlefield, and now you must break all these orbs. And once again, each wing has its own mini time limit where the orb is kind of filling up with dark ooze of some sort. And you gotta take it out before they reset and blow up in your face, and if you fail any of these labors, just give up. Ruin doesn't kill you outright, instead it decreases your maximum HP for the rest of the battle. And if it happens this early on, it's such an uphill battle that there's no real coming back from it. Just reset and save your time and sanity, unless you're in multiplayer I guess, then maybe try to stick it out if your teammate wants to. About 40 of my attempts ended in failure here because I sucked at doing the labors properly. The next part thankfully cuts you a break as you have to destroy his 3 swords before he can unleash Halthus upon you, and for how scary this all looks, I've never actually failed this portion because this Kreia stuff isn't that hard to deal with, and what's hilarious is you can actually pick up the broken swords and throw them at the other swords if you want to. It's pretty funny. I recommend giving it a shot sometime. Finally, he will attempt to unleash Paradise Lost, which would effectively reset the battle, so the game wants you to unleash all of your Skybound arts on him for a full burst, and you know what? This part is pure cinematic bliss. It looks awesome, especially when Sandalphon joins in on the fun. Make no mistake, this fight is awesome and feels like a true reward for those wishing to master the game. But it's also absurdly fucking difficult, and the fact that Sandalphon says now finish this when Lucilius still has over 75% of his health bar is hilarious, but also kind of demotivating. But the music is also very awesome, albeit not even remotely encouraging when it's talking about a usurper god that has no mercy for mankind.
Coward and free, he will not forgive any vice. Devote yourself, your fate is overwritten.
Things get especially dire when the vocals stop though as he performs Celestial Fusion and turns into Lucilius Zero. Well, kind of. Though, honestly, despite the attacks being more devastating, I found this phase to be genuinely easier by the time I was able to reach this part. It only took me 8 attempts to win. It was mostly the labors that kicked my butt. Part of why it's easier is he likes to spend more time in big attacks that leave him more open to getting ass blasted, and he spams Paradise Lost so much that it actually becomes kind of a sigh of relief when you see it, because you're like, okay, I can stun him out of this. Make no mistake, that does not mean it's easy though, because he's still got a bunch of other ultimate attacks like Final Rebellion, which looks scary, but it marks the battle, thankfully, getting kind of close to its end. I found it easier to dodge by just turning the camera upwards and running for your life to avoid the worst of it, instead of trying to dodge skillfully. Just run, that's your better chance. And once he's done, he goes into Paradise Lost once again, which is just free damage at this point. Make no mistake though, this is still far and away the hardest boss in the game, especially since we're still not done as he pulls out the Gopherwood Arc, but mercifully, this is his easiest ultimate attack to avoid, kind of, because while swift, the movements are predictable, as Sandalphon says, and when it's over, he goes into Paradise Lost yet again, turning him into a punching bag because he's getting pretty close to breaking if he hasn't already. This is honestly a fight I found myself using Skybound arts less for offense and dealing damage and more as a defensive method to stall out his attack timers, And if you manage it just right, you can actually delay the end so much that it becomes a freebie to get rid of. Oh yeah, he has an attack at low health called the End, which is just a DPS check. You either take him out here and now, or he rage quits the fight and renders all of your work meaningless by blowing everything the fuck up. I don't even really chance this personally, just go completely all out here. It's the hardest boss in the game by far, and it's one of the hardest bosses I've faced in any video game. Certainly top 5, more than likely top 3. There's a lot of fun to be had here as a challenge to overcome, but there's so many fail conditions, I wouldn't blame you for deciding it's not worth it and just throwing in the towel. And the real kicker is, I didn't even talk about Lucilius Zero, which I'll sum up with, I'm not good enough to beat that boss. Y'all want to see me talk about Lucilius Zero in a larger capacity? Get your ass online and help me, and I'll make a dedicated video just talking about this fight at some point. Number 7. Versa Omega. I'm gonna be honest, I'm actually kinda glad Versa Omega was designed to be a kaiju battle. Given that the real Bahamut Versa hasn't shown up yet on the list, I have some high praise for that, and I think trying to one-up it would probably not pan out very well, so instead they just gave us this awesome kaiju battle that had far more challenge than, well, the other kaiju battle against Angra Mainyu. Here, it's a much tougher fight, and it's not just a slap fight either. The boss has a bunch of different mechanics. You have to fly through the air, dodge all his big complex attacks. The true final boss may not be some oppressive ball buster, but I'm more than happy to take a boss fight that's just here to try and be a good time for the player. It's got cool mechanics, the music is really nice, visually it's very good, thematically it's strong. It brings the story to a really good conclusion, and it's just a lot of fun. And that's something I can honestly get behind. It's challenging enough to not feel mindless, but so much cool crap goes on in the fight that it doesn't have a chance to get stale either. And you've had to go through a bunch of tough quests to get here, so I think this is here to reward the player for all their hard work. Plus, if you really want a ball-busting challenge, let's be honest, you're just gonna stick it out with the master level quests and, well, fight Lucilius and all those other battles. This is just here to satisfy those who want to see the game's true ending, and I'm okay with that. I love this fight. Number 6, Proto-Bahamut. Prior to Behemoth and Lucilius being added, this guy was the hardest boss fight, at least on paper. I didn't really find his fight to be some insurmountable challenge, but it was an absolute blast to play. We finally get our rematch with the tutorial boss, but this time around, instead of it being a glorified cutscene, he's a 3-phase war. Phase 1 is definitely the easiest part of the fight, as he loves to just send out projectiles and you can blast them out of the sky with sufficient gunfire, and also shoot into him a lot with sufficient gunfire. But it won't last too terribly long, as he's going to break his restraints and the fight starts for real. And this is the point where the comedically large laser comes out and makes you wonder how the hell the Grand Cypher is still working, and what the hell it's made of to not go down from this. Otherwise, this phase is more or less the tutorial battle, but for real. So having to fight the dragon fully and not just have it be on a timer, it's really cool. Then he enters his ultimate form that you briefly see during the final boss fight against Versa Omega, and at this point, it's like phase 2, but everything's kicked up to shit hundred and fuck, and I've already used that expression once this video. And if the music hasn't already been going crazy earlier, then at this point, Wings of Destruction sure as heck has kicked it into overdrive by now. Then there's the part of the end where you just crash the Grand Cypher into him once again and you have to take him out before he destroys the ship in one big attack. It can be a tough boss fight, but it's a very satisfying reward for players that decided they wanted to take their builds to the highest level they can and, well, put them to the ultimate test, at least for the time. Number 5, Id. We fight Id a lot in this game. Okay, I'm gonna stop with that. Finally, we get our actual boss fight with Id beneath the castle of Seed Hollow, and it's a pretty big moment in the story because we get our salty run back. He's a tough fight to be sure. He's got himself a great sword, and he's not afraid to use it, and he's even got his own equivalent of Ragnarok. And the game does a respectable job presenting this as your big, tough, zero gimmicks humanoid battle of the game. And yeah, it's fun, it's awesome, and you can even see some of the arena get destroyed in the process. Plus, we have even little cutscene cut-ins for the boss interactions, which I think is pretty cool. But then it really shines when we reach Phase 2 and he goes Dragon Mode, which admittedly looks a bit goofy, but the fight is cool enough that I forgot to care. He'll trap you within an arena and perform a bunch of quick attacks as his ultimate, and at this point, if he hasn't broken it already, he's going to start destroying the pillars around the massive boss arena, making things even more dynamic. It's a great moment in the story where it becomes a clash of equals, even if we have to 4v1 him to make it equal, but semantics, game design, whatever. Still, the fight is awesome, and it does an excellent job hyping the player up as they close in on their final battle, and the craziest thing is, we still have yet another boss fight from Chapter 8 to talk about, because they're just that good of a chapter. Number 4, Radis Whiteworm. It's not a question of, is Radis the best of the elemental dragons, it's a question of, do the other 5 even deserve to be compared to Radis? He finds that good balance of both magic and melee in his attacks that the other dragons were lacking. He doesn't have tedious attacks that go on too long with zero danger, and while he does have gyres that spawn in during the fight and their bombs can damage him, he's not weak to a crippling status effect they cause, so he's able to actually be a challenging super boss. His attacks are fun, the music's pretty intense, the fight is frantic, and unlike some of the bosses, he has multiple ultimate attacks, as he attempts to smite you with the power of God and anime with an ultimate that acts much like a faster and more exciting version of Wilmus's Icicles, and his early ultimate, and then at low HP he has you performing deadly jump rope while dealing with sigils he lays down as mines and explosions from above, while also becoming more physically aggressive. He's got all the best elements of the other dragons while also providing a fun and fair challenge that manages to strike a good balance. The fight surprised me, but it was a ton of fun on my first attempt and upon multiple replays I've had against this battle since I just kept fighting him again for the love of it. Number 3, Magliel and Galanza. Our big fight to cap off Chapter 8's run, and I'm gonna be honest, the top 3 are completely interchangeable for me to the point I've had all 3 of them being in first, second, and third place. Team Rocket here was designed to work together, but instead of Jesse and James, it's Jimmy Neutron and Alucard. This is one of the best duo bosses I've ever faced in a video game, surpassing many of its other contemporaries, and that's because while these two work well together on their own, the bosses were clearly designed to work, well, together. On top of that, they've got some amazing banter because while they give each other crap, they're a fantastic team and their attacks are just really fun to deal with. And that's seen best during their ultimate attack, the Silver Veil Storm. So yeah, they have their own tag team Skybound art that they can perform. That's pretty terrifying, I'm not gonna lie. The fight is hectic and pretty difficult even when I'm over leveled as hell, but it's a fun time nonetheless. Plus Magliel's reaction to Galanza going down is hilarious.
General Galanza, this by hooligans?
All in favor of bringing back words like hooligans into everyday vernacular, please comment down below. Number 2, Bahamut Versa. What is there for me to say about the game's final boss fight other than it's an absolute work of art? Genuinely, one of the finest final bosses I've ever faced in a video game. In fact, I'll get my one complaint out of the way right now, and that's the fact that no one ever shuts the hell up during this fight, at least in story mode. But at the same time, it's a massive story moment as you're trying to save Id's autistic ass so he's not cursed to the fate of being a vessel for this apocalyptic bringer of destruction, because while he was our adversary in the early game, he learned, well, he's a surprisingly good job looking after Lyria, and being a hero is kind of more his shtick. Now, if you're coming in here with a level 75 weapon, honestly, the fight won't stand much of a chance, at least in terms of defenses, but he's got enough shield and cinematic attacks to keep him from being annihilated, and he also does enough damage that you still need to respect everything he can pull out. The first phase will then cap off with you needing to destroy the Bahamut core to stop Reason Transcendence, as it will kill you, here and now. Also, he's hard capped to not go below 50% HP here, so don't worry about that. And once you've broken the core, well, he decides he's going to nuke you anyways, but at the same time, we now have a Lyria-shaped shield to stop the attack, and she responds by summoning Bahamut, who absolutely tears into Versa, causing Draconic Id to break free, while Bahamut and Versa duke it out in the background in the skies above. At this point, you have to keep fighting Id with all his aggression and awesome attacks from before, but he may seem squishy since his health actually isn't that high. But it's a lie, because he's actually got multiple health bars and enough damage output to tear you in half if you're not careful. All the while the music is going crazy and sounding like the final battle in a shonen anime, and that's also the very reason I'm not sure if I want to play the music in this video, because I don't want to risk invoking Cygame's wrath when I still got 2 more weeks left of my Square Enix copyright strike. Yeah, Square Enix is annoying, not gonna lie. Phase 3 is honestly the least interesting of the bunch. It has Draconic Id start charging a powerful attack and not dying because you need to use a Skybound art to break versus hold on him, which means if you haven't charged it up, well, you've got to start charging it up. That's about all there is to it. Phase 4 has Id mostly free of Versus control, but now we need to destroy the crystals trapping him to fully free him, and it's kind of a little DPS check. It's not that hard though. It's really just a chance to just go ham and use whatever else you want while a bit more dialogue plays. It's the final phase where things will kick it back into high gear, as you now have to survive Versus' most powerful attack, Alter Ego Insanus, and I like the dialogue, how it just acknowledges this isn't the gang's first apocalypse and won't be the last, and when you've weathered the storm, you're handed a free cathartic beatdown disguised as a DPS check. This is an excellent final boss fight and genuinely one of the best in any video game, only held back by how unfortunately easy it can be to overpower the boss if you've engaged in the multiplayer aspect of the game. But even then, once you get the true ending, you can choose to replay the chapters on higher difficulties if you're into that, so you can just experience it with a maxed out build. It's one of those rare fights that feels like a perfect way to cap off a game, even if there's another 50 plus hours of game for the completionist out there. Screw it. I'll risk the strike. Music time.
全てこの空破壊精神で色あせた世界に赤き剣で新しい命の傷跡を刻もう青い空が
Number 1. Atama God Pieta. Pieta is one of the 2 super bosses we're given a special cutscene for, as it's presumably a rogue Atama God that stumbled its way into this skydom for, well, boss fight purposes. Also, does anyone else think this guy looks like the Hannibal from God Eater? Hopefully not just me. Anyways, Pieta has no elemental affinity at the start of the fight, so you may think it's going to be one of those no weaknesses deals, but that's not the case. Because shortly after the fight begins, he's going to start using an attack known as Elemental Shift, where he covers the arena in crystals and will become the element of whatever crystals remain, which means he's able to change his element, but you can influence what you want him to be, which makes all the different elemental builds viable, and that's just really freaking cool. Additionally, he loves to ball his different laser attacks, but they actually aren't so fast that I take a shot to the face for blinking. You definitely want to be careful though, because his attacks are extremely deliberate and will catch the lazy player unaware, but it's fun. The first phase though is relatively calm, and that's also reflected by the pretty low-key music that plays here, even after his elemental shift. It's more built up than anything else. However, when you get to half health, the guitars kick in and he busts out the chromatic arc, and this is where the fight goes from really fun to one of the best bosses I've ever faced in a video game. You're dealing with lasers, shockwaves, elemental crystals, trying to do as much damage to you as you can before he begins dropping the orbital space cannon on top of you. It can be tense, but thankfully it's not as overwhelming as you'd think. It's really just a matter of staying focused. And from here on, he begins incorporating his laser bits into his physical attacks, his follow-ups, and everything else to enforce proper positioning, to add to the tension until he can activate Firefly when, he needs to. And this leads to another chromatic arc to survive, but he doesn't even bother waiting before going Tetra Elemental, while now making the entire sky become filled with lasers and simultaneously looking cool as hell, and pretty beyond all words. And he keeps bringing out elemental crystals to stay near permanent elemental shift, but he's no longer remaining passive, which makes the fight more hectic. It's kind of a weird one. I could see this getting out of hand and being annoying for some people, but this just clicks for me. I don't know. I love this fight. Plus, while I definitely think that Bahamut Versa is a much more cinematic boss fight, this one's not lacking in the cinematics, and I just find the actual raw fight itself to be more fun. So, it's going to be a personal preference thing, and quite frankly, I could see people putting anything in the top 15 as their favorite boss in the game. Oh, and guess what? He also has other ultimates he can start performing at low HP depending on whatever element he is, such as Sea of Tides. And yeah, different elements means different ultimates. It makes for one of the most replayable bosses in the game. He's definitely a hard boss, befitting of one of the post-game super bosses and the 4th highest leveled opponent in the game, at least, prior to things like Lucilius Zero. But he's a boss that never frustrated me. In fact, I was getting fed up with Lucilius a lot at times. I'd take a break and fight this guy just to get back into the groove and enjoy myself for a bit. I fought him a dozen times over the last few days. I still haven't gotten sick of it in the slightest. This boss is the front runner for my favorite boss in Granblue Fantasy Relink, and in my opinion, the best boss in the game as well, and I cannot wait to see what they pull out in Endless Ragnarok. I have high hopes and also high expectations. And that, my friends, is going to do it for this boss ranking. We got another long one, and looking at it, holy crap, it's exceeded an hour. I don't know why I make these videos so long, but I do. Guess we can call it love of the game, because I would not be making these obnoxiously long videos if I wasn't having fun. And for those wondering, yes, my next long-form video review retrospective, whatever the heck you want to call it, will be Granblue Fantasy Relink. So, for those that enjoy those sorts of videos I make, and where I cover games in full, look forward to that. Either way, I had a blast revisiting Relink. It was even better than I remembered, and I am extremely excited for Endless Ragnarok. If you haven't played this game, but the bosses looked cool, now is the time for you to jump the heck on board. The game had a price drop a couple months ago as well, so it's now only $40. Anyways, that's all I've got for this video. If you'd like to see more content of varying quality, consider liking, subscribing, and hyping the video. Comment Relink is real if you were mad enough to watch all the way to the end, and I'll see you all next time. Until then, take care.